bulletin. It's my fault, not Ruth's. I didn't get it to her in time. God works in mysterious ways. I didn't have this sermon till Friday, basically. So I've been working.
With the bucket.
We're going to get to the bucket real quick.
Oh, come on.
Because I'm tired of carrying it. So today's message will be from Genesis chapter 42, and we'll go into chapter 43 just a little bit. We're going to ignore the chapter break and go right through. But I'm going to start out today, since I'm tired of holding this bucket. A lot of times I make you wait for the title of my sermon, and then I talk about it in the middle. But today I'm going to talk about it right away, because I want you guys to help me get rid of this bucket. So I'm going to tell you a little story about why I have this bucket in my hand. When I was a young child, my brother, the whole family was fishing. We were at a lake fishing, and we were fishing between two lakes in what's called a spillway. And the spillway has rapid running water through it. It's about the size of, like if we split the church in the middle here, it's about as wide from the middle over to that wall. It's this water that's rushing fast from one lake into the next lake. Well, my brother Matt, I wasn't going to say his name, there it went, so now we know. My brother Matt was told by my dad to go get a bucket and put some water in it so that we could put the fish that we'd caught in the bucket. Matt was probably 7 or 8, I'm guessing. And he stuck the bucket in the water, and guess what happened? Current grabbed him and pulled him, and there he goes, down the spillway. And my mom, luckily she's a very fit woman, even at 75, she's still very fit. She starts running parallel to the spillway, yelling, Matt, let go of the bucket. And Matt said, I can't, Dad will get mad. And he kept holding on to the bucket, and he's going, and she's, oh, Matt, they're having this debate back and forth, and he won't let go. He's on a ride down the spillway. Finally, at the end of the spillway, he hasn't let go yet. Whew, there he goes. Now he's out into the lake. So my mom actually had to dive in the water and go out there and swim and get him. So unfortunately, the bucket drowned. The bucket didn't come back, but Matt did. So he's come a long way since then, but he was always the most obedient of the brothers. And so I think that's the thing, is he was so obedient he wouldn't let go. And the reason I say that today is because that's the title of the message, is let go of the bucket. Some of us are carrying buckets around with us of past, carrying bucket loads of people that maybe we shouldn't be carrying on our backs. And some of us are, past people, and we're carrying around plans that maybe aren't God's plan. So today we're going to see a story in Genesis that kind of looks into that. So that's what the message is about today. But I'm going to have you guys be part of the sermon today, because I'm in a good mood and I want to have some fun. So I'm going to have you guys help me get rid of this bucket. And here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to say something, and then you guys say, just let go. Okay? Is that all right? Yeah. We work together? All right. So number 1, when you're holding on to the past, when holding on to your past stops you from moving forward, you should just let go. When your plans conflict with God's plans, you should just let go. When holding on to the bucket too long, you should just let go. One more. When you're a Nebraska Cornhusker fan, at this point in the season, you should just there we go. All right. I knew that'd get you guys warmed up for the message today. So guess what? I'm letting go of the bucket. Woo, free. Oh, man, it feels good when you get rid of that bucket. All right. Well, let's see how the Bible had a story about someone holding on to things too long. Genesis chapter 9, we're going to start, or chapter 42, verse 29. We'll start there. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. Verse 30, the man who is Lord over the land spoke to us harshly and treated us as though we were spying on the land. So I got to catch you up a little bit. The first part of the sermon today, we have a little catch-up. This isn't a series, so we're not all caught up to this point. Probably most of us know this story, but maybe not all of us. So I'm sure Dewey and Deb are hearing this for the first time. So be patient. We're doing this for Dewey and Deb. All right. So verses 29 and 30, what I want to point out is what's going on here is Jacob sent 10 of his sons. He has 12 sons. He sent 10 of them to the land of Egypt to get grain, to get food, because they were starving. And only 9 of them came back, and we'll explain why the 10th one didn't come back. But they went there to get grain because they weren't even through the second year of a famine that was in the land. There's going to be over 5 more years of this famine. They didn't know that, of course, but they're already having to go to Egypt to get grain. Egypt had grain. Nobody else did. So everybody was coming to Egypt to get grain, and the reason they were going to Egypt to get grain was because there was a man in Egypt who about 9 years ago foresaw this this drought coming, this famine, this famine coming. And he told the Pharaoh of Egypt, he said, we're about to encounter 7 years of abundance. And then after that 7 years, it's going to be 7 years of nothing. So Egypt stored grain for these 7 years, and they had tons of grain even to give out to other people because of this man who was in Egypt. Let's move on to verse 31. Verse 31, but we said, now these are the brothers that came back giving their father a report, just to make sure we understand. But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We are honest men. I want to kind of chuckle at that a little bit. Get your attention, ha. They're not honest men, so necessarily. We're going to see that. We are honest men and we are not spies, they told their father. We told him we were 12 brothers, sons of one father, but one is no more, and the youngest is now with with our father in Canaan. And Austin, could you put that little diagram up, because we've got to go backwards here. I got to give you guys a little history before we move on. Okay. Got it? Okay, we're high tech at Center Baptist Church. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to explain this from my notes so I don't mess it up, because every time I try to do it without my notes, I messed it up. So we've got Jacob. Jacob has 12 kids. Now 9 of them have just come home, and 1 of them was already home. So we see Jacob. Jacob is the son of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham. Jacob's got 12 kids. 9 just came home. 1 stayed in Egypt. 1 stayed home, and the other one, Jacob believes, is dead. His wife Rachel, whom he loved, is also deceased. He worked for Rachel for 14 years to get Rachel before she could be his wife. But once he did get Rachel to be his wife, she was barren. She couldn't have any children for quite some time, and she had to watch 3 other women, one of which was her sister Leah, give birth to other children for Jacob. Finally, the Lord blessed her, and she had 2 boys herself, and that is Joseph and Benjamin. Now here's where the problem comes in. See, Jacob loved Rachel so much that Jacob favored these 2 boys because they were from his wife Rachel and because Rachel was gone. I think that was a part of it. But he favored these 2 so much. Rachel again had died, but she died giving birth to Benjamin, the youngest. So these were the youngest 2 of the 12. Now remember when I laughed when in verse 31 when these guys were telling their dad, we're honest men. Well, there's a little history there of not such honesty. I could talk about the story of the time that Jacob had a daughter too, and she was raped, and some of the brothers deceived. They made a deal with these people and deceived them, and a couple of the brothers went and killed them. We won't get into that, but that was a little deceptive. And then we get into some more deception that we're going to see. So Jacob, like I said, he favored these 2, and what really happened with Joseph is this. We got to talk about Joseph in this story. Like I said, he favored these 2 boys heavily. Joseph created some of this himself, his son Joseph. He kind of bragged about some dreams that he had. In fact, some of these dreams, he said, someday you brothers of mine will bow down before me, and so will father. And that really rubbed them wrong. And then their dad made a fancy coat that's often referred to as the multicolored coat, and he gave it to Joseph, and this did not go over well with the other 10 brothers. And eventually one day, Jacob told Joseph to go out and check on the brothers. Check on and see what they're doing out there herding the sheep. So he went out and he said, brothers, I'm here to check on you for father. And they said, you're here to check on us? Huh. Well, that really upset him. So kind of the straw that broke the camel's back had already happened. They'd had it. They decided they wanted to murder their brother Joseph and get rid of him. They were tired of him, tired of his favoritism, tired of his thinking he's better than them. So they initially were going to kill him, but they didn't. They ended up throwing him in a well, and then he moaned and groaned, and they let him out because they saw a band of slave traders coming by. And rather than get they thought, well, we won't get his blood on our hands if we sell him. So they sold him, and off he went. And now I know most of you know this, but that man, Joseph, their brother that they sold, is the man that we've been reading about in Egypt that they said treated him so harshly. Joseph has went from slave. We don't have time to go through that story, but he's went from slave, and now he's the second in command in Egypt. He's the one that saw the vision of the years of plenty and the years of drought, and he's the one that is going to save a lot of people's lives. And that's the reason everybody's going to Egypt, but these brothers don't know that it's him. So I just got to give you a little more quick history on this deceptiveness that's gone on in the history of Jacob. Now remember, Jacob is their father. But I want to just briefly touch on a few things. There's a lot of deception and a lot of trickery before these kids were even born. Jacob has a brother, as you can see here, named Esau. And I can't get into all this stuff, but just a quick overview. They were twins, born at the same time, but Esau was born first. Esau was the older one. Jacob ended up tricking his brother Esau out of his birthright. Well, he didn't just trick, kind of. Then also, a little later, his mother, Rebekah, put him up to stealing the blessing from his father Isaac by pretending to be his brother Esau. So there's some strong deception in Jacob's background before these kids are even born. And then, just one more thing, after that, Esau, who was the hunter and the aggressor, the kind that you could be scared of, after Jacob stole Esau's blessing, it was word that Esau was going to kill Jacob. Sorry, these names get tough. So Jacob had to leave the land, and he went and stayed with his uncle Laban, where more deception happened. He got there, he met Rachel, he wanted to marry her, but then guess what happened? 7 years he worked to marry Rachel. On the night of his wedding, Laban got him intoxicated. That's why we don't drink too much. And they slipped the sister Leah in, the older sister, and he laid with her. And the next morning he said, what happened? I wanted Rachel. I worked 7 years. And he said, in our area, in our country, it's not custom to marry the younger sister before the older sister. So you get Leah. If you work another 7 years, you can have Rachel. So he did. But I just want to tell you that because here's this family that ends up becoming the nation of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel come from this family. And look at all the deception and the dysfunction that's going on. I mean, these 10 brothers for all these years have had to hide the fact that they lied to their dad. Joseph, their brother, wasn't killed by a wild animal. They sold him. So, I mean, this could be a made-for-TV miniseries, the drama that's going on here. But yet God can take this family and all this that's going on in that family, and you're going to see how God can make some things happen, even from a family like this. So I guess the one last point I wanted to make is, so if you've got some dysfunction in your family, we usually don't like to talk about that at church. But if this family had dysfunction, we've all got a little dysfunction in our family. We don't always talk about that, but now you can feel free to share it with your brothers and sisters here at church, because if a family like that had dysfunction, yeah, we've all got a little dysfunction, except for Fred. I can tell he does not have any dysfunction. All right, so we're back to our text. Does everybody kind of understand that diagram and who's who, I hope? All right, well, if you don't, well, we'll do our best to make sense of it all.
If you don't read the Bible.
If you don't read the Bible. Thanks, Dewey. Bible plug there. Let's see. So we're on verse 33. Chapter 42, verse 33. Now remember, the brothers were back to the story. The brothers are telling their father what happened. The man who is Lord over the land said to us, this is how I will know whether you are honest men. Remember, this man who's the Lord over the land is actually their brother, Joseph. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food home to your starving households and go. Bring your youngest brother to me, so that I will know that you are not spies, but you are honest men, like you say you are. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in this land, grain, all you want. Verse 35, as they were emptying their sacks, now they're home emptying their sacks with their father Jacob, emptying the grain out, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver, the silver that they used to buy the grain. They got it back. They got their grain and their silver back. When they, the brothers, and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, because Simeon's the one that stayed in Egypt. And now you want to take Benjamin from me. And he cried out, everything is against me. Verse 37, but then Reuben who was one of the ones that tried to save Joseph when the brothers sold him. He tried to stand up for Joseph. He tries to intervene here. Verse 37, Reuben said to his father, you may put both my sons to death if I do not bring Benjamin back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. Now here comes a big verse, verse 38. But Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one I have left. See, Rachel's dead too. This is all he's got left of his wife Rachel. because Joseph's gone, Rachel's gone. If harm comes to him on the journey that you are taking, because he's determined they're going without Benjamin, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. He's not letting Benjamin go with him. And I just wanted to say that here's some of this. Sometimes when we have dysfunction in our past, it catches up with us. And we have to deal with it at one point. And I think sometimes when you're lucky, God helps you deal with it. God puts you in situations. That's why the Bible says, rejoice in your tribulations. Because he doesn't understand this right now. He thinks everything's against him. But remember, he's highly favored by the God who works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But Joseph's not thinking right, Jacob, father Jacob, is not thinking right. He thinks everything's against him. And I just want to touch on what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, verse 37, 38. Just to kind of highlight the dysfunction that's going on here. And I can't criticize Jacob, don't get me wrong. I've never lost a child. I hope I never do. I can understand his grief. It's been like 22 years at this point since this happened, but there's some dysfunction. Things aren't going right. He's not thinking clearly, and we're going to see why he's not thinking clearly in a minute. But just to touch it, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me, this is a hard teaching here. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So Jesus really highlights that there's some dysfunction going on right now because he's going to hold on to this son so tightly. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at the effects of what this could have, his dysfunction, what this dysfunction can cause. So we're going to move on quickly to chapter 43. Read the first 8 verses here. 43. Now they're done talking to their father. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they had brought back from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah said to his father, "The man warned us solemnly, Father, you will not see my face again unless your brother Joseph is with you. If you will send our brother Benjamin along with us, we will go and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. Because the man said to us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you." God's really digging into Jacob right now. Israel asked, "Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling me the man you had another brother?" And they replied, "The man questioned us closely, Father, about ourselves and about our family." Because see, the guy who's questioning them knows their family pretty well. He asked us, "Is your father still living? Do you have another brother?" We simply answered his questions. How were we to know that he would say, "Bring your brother down here"? Then Judah said to Israel, his father, Now Judah's trying to do what Reuben did. The situation's gotten worse. They're about out of food again. Judah intervenes and he says to his father, "Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may survive and live and not die." And that's where I want to spend some time talking today, because God has brought this to a head. He said, we've got to send Benjamin. We don't have a choice. If we don't send Benjamin's going to die. We're all going to die. You're going to die. Everybody dies. So he's got no choice. But that's the thing I want to point out today in today's message is it's the same choice that his grandfather had. Oh, he took it down. That's okay. Remember Abraham, his grandfather? He had to give up Isaac. He was asked by God to give up Isaac, the son he waited so long for. And he was going to sacrifice his son Isaac, but God called him off and sent a replacement instead. He sent a savior instead, so he didn't have to do that. Now he's in a similar situation. Now he has to release his grip. He has to let go. Like I let go of the bucket, he has to let go of his son Benjamin, or his whole family dies. God has brought this to a head. So, and I think that's the choice that we all have. Because see, there's a famine in the land, and I think there's a famine in this land. I think there's a spiritual starvation going on here. I think that we're not doing a good enough job as Christians feeding our families spiritually. because I see a famine growing and growing in the country. I see some great work being done as well, but I also see a famine growing in this country. And that's why it's our responsibility. We have to make the choice. Will we feed our family spiritually? Will we feed them Jesus? Or will we not? And if we don't, they'll starve spiritually. And there's a world full of wolves out there that are just chomping at the bit, waiting. And there's an enemy we have that looks to devour us like a roaming lion. So let's see what happens if we make the wrong choice. But just think about that. Jacob has a choice, but we have the exact same choice. We have to choose to serve God, or we're in a lot of trouble. What are we holding on to? Let's start with plans. Plans, some of us, and it's okay to have some plans, some worldly dreams, some desires. God instilled us to be motivated to make plans and have desires. But when those desires get in the way, get in between us and God, then those plans can become a problem. Just for example, for myself, but my plan my whole life has been that once I retire, I'm going to go buy a house near a lake, and I'm going to spend every day fishing, and I'll go to church on Sunday, but that's it. So I'll spend most time fishing for fish, and just a little bit of time fishing for God. I'll be at church once a week. That's probably about it. Maybe a Bible study here and there, but most of my time will be for me and a little bit for God. But see, in the last few years, as God has changed my heart, that's changed. I don't see how I will fish like that anymore. This year I only fished for 3 or 4 days. Now I see when I retire someday, it'll be primarily spent fishing for men and a little bit of fishing. When God awards me a time and creates a good environment, that's when I'll go fishing. Our plans need to be flexible. If our plans aren't aligned with God's plans, we're in trouble. I apologize for having to look at my notes more today than usual, but like I said, I just got this message on Friday. So Proverbs 16:9, it says, talking about plans, in their hearts humans plan their course. Proverbs 16:9. In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. What's going on right now with Jacob, and maybe going on with some of us, is he's living in fear. He's living in fear. He's holding on so tightly to Benjamin because he's holding on to a person because that person represents his past. And that person, he had plans. We're going to talk about this. He needs to lighten up his grip on Benjamin. Or, like I said, everybody's going to die, and sometimes we need to lighten up our grip on our plans, on our dreams, and we need to make sure they're aligned with God. We need to trust His superior plan and look for His superior plan and then try to live it. What happens if He doesn't, if we don't? If He doesn't loosen His grip, He won't see the plan that God has for him, just like you won't see. And most of us that know this story, we know what a great, great plan God has for him, what he's got. If he can just release Benjamin, let him go, God's got a great, great plan for him, and I believe God has a great, great plan for each one of us. But sometimes there's things we have to let go of. He has to let go of Benjamin. What do you have to let go of? You have to decide what is it you have to let go of. In the meantime, while you're deciding, not to make anybody hurry, but there's ramifications in the meantime. And I want to take a look. The Bible doesn't really speak to it, but I want to talk about what Benjamin must have been going through as his brothers went on trip after trip, and he said, no, you're not going. You'll stay here with me. You can't go. No. What's going on with Benjamin? He's being smothered. He's being choked. He has, his wings won't soar because I think Jacob's holding on so tightly, he's just staying there. And while we're deciding sometimes what we should do, serve Christ or not serve Christ, things like this happen. We live in fear. Because God is perfect love, and perfect love casts out fear. And when you don't have perfect love, you're going to have fear, you're going to have anxiety, you're going to have problems. And let's think, what could have been happening to Benjamin here? He's being smothered. He's not able to do what he wants to do. And sometimes in our life, we smother people because of fear. We smother people. But they now have a new term called helicopter parent, where we hover over our kids and protect them from anything. Michelle? I am too, Michelle. I'm working on it, but yeah, I am too. Helicopter parent. Sometimes we helicopter parent our kids. We protect them from everything. Sometimes we are helicopter spouses. Sometimes we hover over our spouse and we don't let them go. I mean, there's relationships. I'm going to rattle a few things off here out there that are going on where people say to their spouses, you can't do this, you can't do that. Where have you been? I need to know every detail about what you've been. Now today with phones, I want to check your phone. I want to investigate what's going on. Hovering, smothering, choking. Why are we in a relationship with someone we trust so little, I wonder? Because sometimes we can choke the best thing we have in our life. I want to talk about one example from the Bible really quickly who did that was King Saul. Remember who he choked? And he choked himself because he was given a blessing in a man named David. But when the crowd cheered for David more than him, he got fearful that he might take my crown. And what did he do? Instead of enjoying this blessing of this wonderful man that was in his life that could have won victories and done great things, which he did eventually, but after he was done getting chased by Saul, who was trying to kill him the whole time, because Saul was afraid he would take his crown. Saul became fearful and insecure, and fear blocked the blessing that Saul had in his life. And the last thing I want to say about people before we move on is sometimes we just have to let people go. Sometimes we just have to let people go. I'm sure some of you can think of a few people in your life. Here's the thing. Remember the story in the New Testament where this is what I talked to the kids at youth group about a couple weeks ago. Remember the story in the New Testament where Jesus was speaking and it was so crowded that nobody could get in there? So the 4 men took their friend who was lame and carried him and lifted him up on the roof, and they ripped a hole in the roof so they could lower him down so Jesus could heal him. Those 4 friends weren't they? There was no door, but that didn't stop them. They went to the roof. So my question is, do you have friends in your life that are trying to take you to Christ, that are trying to lead you to Christ? Or do you have friends that are trying to lead you away? You might say, yeah, I've got friends who would do anything for me. Yeah, they'd give you the shirt off their back, they'd help you fix your car, they'd do a lot of things, but are they leading you to Christ? That's the question. Would they take you to Christ? That's the thing. And if they're not, it doesn't mean we have to discard them. No, we need to love them, but sometimes we might need to put a little distance between us and them and surround ourselves for our own spiritual safety, surround ourselves with people who are leading us to Christ. I made that mistake when I was 19. When I first started hearing the Word of God, it struck my heart very closely and I wanted to follow, and I stopped doing all the things that I was doing that I won't mention here because they're not appropriate. I stopped doing those things for about a year and hanging out with those friends, but I kept hanging out with the friends. That was the problem. I kept hanging out with them, trying to get them to go to Bible study with me, but they wouldn't. And after a year, guess where I was? Not at Bible study. I was out with those guys doing the things that I can't talk about here. So, what are you holding on to? The last thing I want to, Last thing I want to briefly talk about is past. Sometimes we have things from the past that cause us to have fear and cause us to have problems. Like I said, I was carrying a bucket today to make an example about we have to let go of things. Wasn't it ridiculous that I was carrying that bucket all morning? Just like it was ridiculous that my brother wouldn't let go of the bucket and got carried out to sea. Sometimes we're doing the same thing. We're carrying stuff we shouldn't carry. We've got to see that stuff and let it go, or it's hard to move forward. So the past, some of us have terrible, terrible things that have happened to us in the past. We've been neglected, we've been abused, we've been mistreated, we've been lied to, we put faith in people that didn't come out. Sometimes we put faith in the church, and the church seemed to let us down. God didn't let you down, it was the people. Or maybe it was just you, I don't know. But there's things from our past that we're hanging on to. Find out what those things are, put them in your bucket, and let it go. Let it go drowned out in the spillway. All right. So here we are. Jacob has now got to let go. It's time for Jacob to let go. If he doesn't let go, just like us, same decision we have, Jacob had. We will see if he will let go. But one last thing. The key to some of these things are, if you're a helicopter spouse, helicopter friend, helicopter parent, if you're living in fear of any kind, afraid to let your friends go because you'll be alone, remember this. Trust Christ. He loves you. And he loves those people even more than he loves you, or even more than you can love them. And he's more capable of protecting them and taking care of them. I know some of us are divorced and our kids are at a different house, and I can't sit and worry all day about what goes on at that house. I have to trust God. He loves them more than I do. He's more capable than I am of taking care of those kids. I have to trust God to do that. Now, sometimes things might go on that are bad and you might have to intervene, but we need to trust God. And Jesus reminded us in John chapter 14, he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives." His peace isn't like the peace we think of. "Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." Don't worry about anything, but pray about everything. It's been told to us over and over and over in the Bible, and the only way we can do this is if we make the decision to closely follow Christ. All right, let's move on. We're almost done. How much time? Ooh. Everybody still awake? Because we're running a little late today. Ruth, are you awake? Okay, good. Dottie, okay. Sorry, I'm keeping you guys late. It's Communion Sunday, but this is such a great ending. I gotta get it. So we're gonna, a couple of verses in chapter 43. Let's see. Verse 11. Their father Israel said to them. Now remember, Judah had just said to him, let me go, let me take Benjamin, otherwise we all die. Am I in the right spot? Okay. Verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, this is chapter 43, verse 11, if it must be, then do this. And then he goes on to say for a few verses to take all these gifts with them to hopefully appease this king. But in verse 14, I really like what he says in verse 14. Now Jacob's getting his head screwed on straight. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. He let go. That's it. Now we're going to see what happens when you let go. I'm not going to read it due to time, but in chapter 45 is a beautiful, beautiful story. The brothers go back to get more grain, and they take Benjamin with them, and Joseph reveals himself to them. And it's a glorious scene where Joseph forgives them, and there's a lot of hugging and crying and things that go on. But I wanted to read to you verse 46 because we were talking about Jacob today. So chapter 46, verse 28 is when Jacob and Joseph finally get together. I want to read that to you. Now Jacob sent Judah ahead of him. They're on their way to go meet. The brothers have went back. They've got the family. The whole family is coming to Egypt to see Joseph. Now Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. When they arrived in the region of Goshen, Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. Remember, Jacob is the one who God changed his name to Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. What a reunion. It tugs at my heart. Such a wonderful thing. Verse 30. Israel, Jacob, said to Joseph, Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive. See the blessing that God had waiting for him at the end? Everything's against me. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. We have promises too. We can have reunions like this in heaven someday. Jesus said in John chapter 14, verse 3, and if I go, I'm still a little shook up about that one verse. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. He also says we're not ignorant of where he is. He says, you know the way to the place where I am going. We've got loved ones there, all of us do. We've all got loved ones there that we can have this kind of reunion with. But you got to make the decision. You got to make the decision. And I know that you want to see them, and you want to see the people that are still here with you today. But we can't spiritually starve our families. If we're not feeding them Jesus, if we're not role modeling Jesus for them, we're starving them.